This is the BCSN Pod Zone, your place for the news, views, and conversations about all things related to HBCU athletics. Hear the BCSN SportsWrap, Dr. Cavil's Inside the HBCU Sports Lab, Knights of the Round Table, the pregame show, the Carlos Brown Show, the ONG Strike Zone, and more in one place. We are changing the way you consume HBCU sports, one broadcast at a time.
Maureen is saving big holiday shopping at Amazon, so now she's free to become Maureen the Merrier. Food is her love language, and she really loves her grandson. Like, really loves.
Nope. Nope.
Come on, him?
Ooh, I like him.
Quick, the quicker picker-upper. Bounty picks up messes quicker, and each sheet is 2 times more absorbent, so you can use less.
He's an 8.
He's a 9.
Bounty, the quicker picker-upper.
It's never too early to plant the seed, to share the tradition, and instill a sense of pride in your HBCU with your little ones. HBCU Pride and Joy Children's Boutique helps you share your school spirit with a wide selection of adorable kids' apparel and accessories officially licensed from your favorite HBCU. Visit hbcupridejoy.com and follow us on all social media at HBCU Pride Joy on Facebook and Twitter.
Time to call a credit repair company to fix my credit.
Hold the phone, man. You can do it yourself with Credit Versio.
That's way too hard. Call the credit repair company. Most credit repair companies only work on 1 or 2 accounts at a time, making it slow and expensive. You won't figure that out for months. Ignore him. Credit Versio's brilliant software scans all 3 credit bureaus, finds the accounts that are hurting your score, and guides you through the entire process. Anyone can do it. Let's fast forward and see the results.
Wow, I fixed my own credit and saved hundreds.
You can do this. Visit creditversio.com.
It's like a loop machine. All around town, people trying to get down.
You see, Head & Shoulders has scalp shield technology, protects against flakes, even between washes. It's never not working.
Kind of like us. Number 15?
Never not working.
I don't like this one.
Me neither.
Let's get out of here.
Head & Shoulders scalp shield, never not working.
This is the Dean of the College of HBCU Sports, Kenyatta Cavil of Dr. Cavil's Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington and Charles Bishop. Come mix it up in the lab where the course lecture is in session every Tuesday from 6 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time on Facebook Live, YouTube Spreaker, or the BCSN app, as we discuss all things about the HBCU sports culture, including exploring the week that was in the sporting HBCU diaspora, as well as the upcoming week of HBCU sports. With me, the Dean, the College of HBCU Sports, on Dr. Cavil's Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington and Charles Bishop. Course lecture dismissed.
Charmin Ultra Soft has so much cushiony softness, it's hard for your family to remember. They can use less.
Sweet pillows of softness.
This is soft.
Holy Charmin. Oh, excuse me. Roll it back, everybody.
Sorry.
Charmin Ultra Soft is so cushiony soft, you'll want more. But it's so absorbent, you can use less, so it's always worth it.
Now, what did we learn about using less?
You gotta roll it back, everybody.
We all go. Why not enjoy the go with Charmin?
If you think all pads are exactly the same, think again. This is Always Ultra Thins reinvented with the Always Triple Protection System. This pad wicks gushes 90% faster, absorbs even more so you can feel dry, and locks odors in. Rethink your pad for up to 100% leak-free and odor-free comfort with the totally reinvented Always Ultra Thins. This is always like never before.
Follow the Black College Sports Network on social media at MyBCSN1, the number 1, on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at MyBCSN1.
Welcome into another edition of the BCSN Sports Wrap. Brian Fulford, AD. Oh, wait a minute. That's how we normally start this thing off. AD Drew here this week. Special guest Kelvin Carter sitting in the other chair. Brian is out, as Dr. Cavil likes to say. He's out on assignment. He's on the road. So I have to move over one chair, and I have to bring somebody to go sit in my chair. So I decided to bring my homeboy from St. Louis, Missouri, and Kelvin, my brother. How you doing today, man? Do a wellness check on you?
pretty good after the weekend down on the reservation. All in all, great experience being at home, watching us for homecoming take on Texas Southern, who turned out to be a very formidable opponent.
Yeah, HBCUs of the state of Mississippi yesterday, 1-2 on homecoming. Why the heck did everybody schedule their homecoming on the same day in the state of Mississippi? Can you help me out with that one, brother?
Well, I don't think that it was a planned operation. I think also too you have to remember Alcorn opted out of the play, which threw our schedule off. So potentially, if the scheduling would have went on course, it would have just been 2 out of the 3, or possibly none. So there were a lot of factors there. But let's look at the glass half full on this on this point as opposed to half empty. What if we marketed everybody within a 100-mile radius of each institution just show up at that institution for that homecoming game? So that way you get 80,000 people in Jackson, 80,000 at Alcorn, 80,000 at Mississippi Valley, and you have a tremendous exposure event for all of those young people to HBCUs.
That's why we bring you on, because you bring on a totally different perspective. You bring on the business and the educational perspective into this. And so before we get going, let me say hello to a couple of our people who we have on right now. Got Walter Harley, Tamara T, Mary 305, David Garner, Franklin Kuntz, and Anthony Partee, some of the early people here on the BCSN Sports Wrap. Hey, whether you're early, whether you join us late, this is what we need you to do. We need you to click that thumbs up, like, subscribe, follow, share, and if you're really feeling generous, this is homecoming season. This is the season of giving, Kelvin. We need you to make a small donation to help keep this podcast going. We're not asking for a whole lot. We not supposed to be like the president and ask you to write all the checks with commas in them. We take checks with cents in them too, but I need a good number in front of those cents, though. At least a good single digit. I prefer a double digit in front of that cents, but I'll take what I can get right now, my brother.
Hey, I concur.
All right, there you go. And so let's start off right here, Kelvin. Let's start off with your alma mater, the Alcorn State Braves. Great shootout with Texas Southern, game that came down to the wire, but truth be told, Texas Southern had control of that game in the fourth quarter, took control of that game early in the fourth quarter. Alcorn made a good run there at the end, and unfortunately, you only get 60 minutes to play football unless you're tired, and that's what Alcorn tried to do with the late touchdown and then the onside kick at the end of the game. You were there live on the reservation, Kelvin. Tell us what you saw down there in the reservation.
So first of all, I saw a really strong defense on both sides of the ball. Alcorn played well on defense, strong on defense, but that predictability of their offense came out to be a sore point. So probably on a late drive going in the second quarter, we gave up an interception on a guy that just read the route perfectly from Texas Southern and scored that touchdown. And that touchdown turned out to be the difference in that game. But that predictability on offense is becoming, very challenging. Although the stats don't tell it. The quarterback threw for 396 on, I believe, 23 or 48 passing, 3 touchdowns, but also he had 3 turnovers. And if you give the ball away in the SWAC, of course, it's hard to win. And then Howard also actually came out and had another amazing rushing game, where he came out and did his job, 23 rush attempts, 135 yards, about a 6-yard per carry average. However, we're very, very predictable with not throwing vertical routes and a lot of hitches. So those are the things that I saw and, that game management piece. So tough loss on homecoming. Here's an interesting fact. And one of the guys next to me said this. Texas Southern ran the 5 receiver set, I believe, 27 times. And Body, the quarterback for TSU, ran the ball out of the 5 receiver set 23 times for positive yardage. It was really interesting to see them, leverage that. And those are the types of in-game adjustments that we're looking for to see if we can, clean up some of those things moving forward, especially with Prairie View coming up next week on a Friday night at we got Bethune-Cookman coming in after that at Alcorn State University. And then on November 19th, of course, Jackson State University rolls into the reservation for last game of the season.
Yeah, Andrew Body on the day had 22 rushing attempts for a net of 79 yards. And when your quarterback leads your team in rushing attempts and you're not running the old Oklahoma Sooners wishbone offense, makes you kind of stop and take pause there. Passing on the day, Body was 12 of 20 for 97 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 INT, and was sacked 4 times. So, yeah, you're absolutely right. Andrew Body did something probably that was not picked up on film, but obviously Texas Southern had to pick up something on film to know that they could run Body 20, 22 times in a particular ball game. Still there, Kelvin?
Yes, sir.
Oh, I lost you there for a moment. But yeah, I was just saying, they had obviously Texas Southern picked up something on film to know that they could run Andrew Body that many times in a particular ball game, because usually no one likes to put their quarterback in that type of jeopardy.
Yeah, and he was really not in harm's way with any of those carries. It was, like I said, they were in a 5 receiver set, so you're running off the DBs and basically without a spy in there to kind of control him or navigate where he is at all times. That's the situation that he was in. So basically he was running like in a free field. And I will say this, I believe if sacks count against your rushing total, then
Which they do.
he probably, yes, and he more than likely rushed for over 100 yards.
Yeah. Well, they said he had a gain of 98, but he lost 19, and I'm assuming most of those 19s came on those sacks that you are currently talking about. Moving on to the other game in the state of Mississippi, the game in the state of Mississippi. That's with two E's, as they like to do down there in Jackson, Mississippi. Jackson State, Campbell. Game that was a lot closer than a lot of people expected, but the stats really do not tell how that particular game went. Kelvin, did you happen to get a chance to catch any of this game?
Yes, that game, and when you really look at it, that team, Campbell, actually was a formidable foe coming out of the Big South. They were solid, and I do deem them as a really good pick for homecoming because they they could have fallen to them, but it's kind of a measuring stick game as well because when I look at Campbell, although they're not a HBCU, they carry some. They're in that realm because they're over there in the conference, I believe, with Robert Morris, and I don't know if A&T is in that conference as well. But they're in a situation.
Yes, that's their opponent next week.
Yes, so I would love. I'll watch closely to see how Campbell plays against A&T coming off the game with Jackson State. Kind of really look at how they function, but led by a former NFL player, did a great job recruiting, and I actually think that game will that A&T game should be closer than we think.
And we'll get to North Carolina A&T in just a moment. Looking at the box score of this particular game, just lost my place there. Jackson State had 7 more first downs than Campbell, had 20 compared to 13. Total offense. Jackson State, 411 yards. Campbell, 247 yards. What kept Campbell in the game? 1 INT by Jackson State and 1 lost fumble by Jackson State. So that's what kind of kept Campbell in the game. Also, something that kept Campbell in the game, Jackson State wound up kicking field goals against Campbell
Yeah.
in places where they
Yes.
have kicked touchdowns against other teams. And one other thing, because I was watching that game live, there was I believe it was a 35 or a fourth and two. I believe it was a 4th and 2. And Jackson State had just called the time out. And, excuse me, it was a 4th and goal. And then coming out of the time out, Jackson State gets a false start, which forces them to kick one of those field goals. So a couple of mental errors there by the Jackson State Tigers there, Kelvin.
Yeah, but when I look at it, I really look at the fact that the West Virginia transfer, nobody's talking a lot about Savion Wilkerson, but I'll say this: 24 yards, 116. 24 carries for 116 yards, 4.8 yards per carry, with 1 touchdown, and then they got another 56 yards on 11 carries from J.D. Martin. So you put together a solid balanced attack. They went for 172 on the ground and 233 in the air, and take away the interception, which stalled, as well as, like you said, they kicked 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 field goals, definitely in places where they would like to score touchdowns. Now, another thing on the glass half full, in the SWAC, we've known the challenges around the kicking game over the years. And so if you touchdowns in the space of those, the score probably stretches out to like a 21 point, win for the Tigers. But really strong showing there. And field goals will matter, especially as it gets it won't get as cold here. We got about 2 more weeks here in the state of Mississippi, and before that temperature drops, but that'll give them something to look forward to, that their kicking game is solid and can carry them in times where the offense kind of stalls.
Yeah, kicking game has been crucial. That cost Jackson State a couple of times. Well, it made some games last year a little bit closer than it should have been. If you go back to that spring season, it actually cost them a couple of times during the spring season. Now, we were talking about something off from the air. We were talking about the interception that Shadua threw in that particular game. And you made a point. Go ahead. I want you to bring that point up on air about that interception that Shadua threw down there on the goal line.
It's the same one. I've seen it happen 3 times in the first 3 games. And it's on a throw and a play, and it's almost like he checks into it and it matches up. And to me, in those situations, with Savion at the running back position, they would have been more enticing, I believe, if they were grounded in running the football at that point. However, with Bartolone and the air raid, I think they trust this process down here, especially putting this quarterback in tough situations where, when everybody in the building is knowing you're going to run it and coming out and throwing the football. I think these are situations that you put him in, and it enhances his ability. And also, too, that the Aubrey Miller transfer has just been so impactful. He came out from the University of Missouri by way of Memphis. So he's added to a stacked deck, but he wreaks havoc all day long, which allows Jackson State to play that press coverage out on the outside and really get up into you and trust in the fact that they're going to get pressure on the quarterback.
Yes, definitely. Let's move over to the BAC. Game of the week in the BAC. And this game, for all intents and purposes, may actually determine who gets to be the opponent in the Celebration Bowl, that being South Carolina State and North Carolina Central. In a very hard-fought game, South Carolina State edged out North Carolina Central in a game that went back and forth. When you could sit here and look at this particular game, I believe I'm going back to the scoring in this particular game. North Carolina Central took the lead early. South Carolina State answered with 20 points in the second quarter. Then Central came back with another 10 points in the third quarter, but were unable to get anything in the fourth quarter. South Carolina State was able to add a touchdown, and then basically the defense showed up for South Carolina State down the stretch, getting that big stop. And the one thing that I remember in this game sticking out before I even get into the stats in this particular game. Central was driving the ball late in the fourth quarter and pretty much ran the ball down South Carolina State's throat. The one time they decided to put the ball in the air, you get it picked off in the end zone. And in a situation, he should have taken a knee in the end zone, but I think he wound up bringing it back out to maybe like the 10 or the 12-yard line. But irregardless, it was a turnover in the red zone when all Central needed at that point, due to South Carolina State's lack of a kicking game, was a field goal. Because South Carolina State had missed not one, but 2 PATs.
Yeah, and that was actually surprising that they ran that threw the ball in that situation, because literally I think as we're seeing with some of these defenses, South Carolina State is staunch, but we saw from North Carolina Central, Latrell Collier ran for 140 yards on 16 carries. Davius Richard, the quarterback, carried the ball 14 times for 80 yards while throwing for 177. So you got 220 yards on the ground between your quarterback and your wide receivers. So what we saw is something I think that coming back, if we do some foreshadowing towards a potential Celebration Bowl matchup, I think just tossing the ball around, might not be the option. We might, they might go with the kid. Like I said, the transfer, from West Virginia is incredible. And we'll see how that looks, because I believe they found something against South Carolina State, which is super tough across the board. So we'll see how all this plays out.
The question for everybody is, does anyone have a corner or a set of defensive backs that can match up with Shaquan Davis? Not only in the BAC, but in the SWAC. I mean, Shaquan Davis sits good 6'5", probably about 230 or somewhere up in that range. And he single-handedly kept South Carolina in that game. I believe he had 3 touchdowns on the day, if I recall that correctly, and had an additional touchdown called back. Yeah. Okay, he had 2 touchdowns, and then he had a third one that was called back on I believe it was a holding penalty. So, but how they say you can't coach speed and you can't coach height. Well, Shaquan Davis has a little bit of both there for you, and he's a touch matchup for, especially if you only got like 5'10", 6-foot corners.
Well, I think when you look at it too, he was 6 for 116. He's averaging 20 yards per catch. And then their second guy, Kendrell Flowers, is 15 yards a catch, 4 for 58. I think they do put a unique set of circumstances there. But once again, when you start talking about that rush coming from like the Aubrey Miller guys, you got a situation where we'll see this is a retooled situation. And I think too, remember, controlling the ball on offense is going to be one of the keys to success against South Carolina State, because Davis is the real deal and they don't mind getting in the ball.
Yeah, the biggest thing I have, when you're back out the backfield, Kendrell Flowers is your second leading reception person on your team, and he's not named McCaffrey. Makes you kind of stop and think right there as to how they or Deebo Samuel. Those are the 2 that you think of as far as people coming out the backfield, being able to catch the ball in space and do some things. So makes you kind of wonder, okay, why you can't put a man underneath and a man on top of Davis, spy on Flowers, and let somebody else beat you.
And I think one of the comments in the chat was, them playing bump and run and press coverage with a group of a young defensive backfield against a guy who is hard enough to handle with 2 people on him. But if you're leaving him one-on-one, just on sheer size and just putting the ball in positions where he can go and make a play on that football, I think would be a better scenario.
Yeah, I mean, the man can catch the jump ball. He can catch the back shoulder fade. He can catch the ball going across the middle. It's going to be kind of hard to figure out how to deal with him. Hey, my brother, before I stay on this MEAC, I forgot the last homecoming game there in the state of Mississippi, and that was Bethune-Cookman and Mississippi Valley. Bethune-Cookman getting its second win on the. Go ahead.
Yep. No,
Yeah, so
second win on the
Bethune-Cookman.
season.
Yeah, and Valley. Here's the question. First of all, do you see a win on Valley's schedule this season? Let's start off right there. Do you see where Valley can get a win?
Well, I'm trying to see where they can get one because at this rate, I mean, they scored 21 points in the third and 7 in the fourth. And I mean, obviously they have Jalen Jones threw for 274 yards on 8 and 30 with 2 TDs. Quashawn Bird, the wide receiver, 17 catches for 109, and then another rushes. And then Jalen Jones also rushed for another 94 yards. So you hit Valley. I said it last week after watching them up close. They're definitely not what a 0-8 record is reflective of. But you're right. I don't know if I'm seeing a win, which they might can eke one out against Alabama A&M.
The same Alabama A&M that's 3-1, that's one game behind Jackson State is a team that you putting out there as a possible victory. I just want to make sure we on the same page right here. I just want to make sure, my brother.
Well, the choices are you got a situation. The other choices with the Valley are they either beat Southern or Prairie View. So
I give a better chance against Prairie View than A&M. And I'm really stretching if I'm giving them a chance against Prairie View.
That's what I was. That was my thought. So I probably just chose A&M in alphabetical order.
I got you. Hey, I'm gonna tell you what I found unique about this game though, and I watched part of this game because it was great being at home on a Saturday afternoon and being able to just channel surf. Man, I had one game on the TV in the bedroom. I had one game on the big screen in the living room. I had 2 laptops, my iPad, and my cell phone all going at the same time, like between that 3 o'clock and 6 o'clock hour, because there were games on all over the place and all of them were interesting. And I'm trying to figure out how to turn the sound down on this one because this one is interesting at this moment. All right, let me turn the sound down out on this one and go back to this. But when I turned the sound up on the Valley game, what I found interesting was the fact that this was at the 6:45 mark. There was a 98-yard kickoff return after a touchdown by Bethune-Cookman. Darnell Dees scored a 98-yard kickoff return. This is after Valley had just scored on a 5-play, 33-yard drive. So 15 seconds later, got a touchdown for Bethune. Then, 15 seconds after that, Kobe Bates said, I got you. I got one for you too. He returns the ball 97 yards for a touchdown for the Valley. So, within 30 seconds, you had 3 touchdowns between these two teams. 2 of them by Valley, 1 of them by Bethune. That was just for 2 teams that are pretty much the cellar dwellers in the SWAC East. That was an exciting portion of the game. And there was also I believe it was a 97-yard interception return in the first quarter by Amari Hill. So a lot of defensive plays and special teams plays that were just exciting for the fans there on homecoming, despite the fact that the Delta Devils took that loss there, Kelvin.
Well, the other part too is, and it's a recurring theme across, I know 3 games that I watched. The Braves game was a special teams anomaly in that both teams were very bad. Both teams, the punt game, all phases of it, defending the returns. It was just incredible to see the lack of the third phase of the game, really being up to par. And it promoted some of those type fast drive, like you say, coming right back, right back behind it. And this is due to poor special teams play.
Yeah, and it is what it is. A couple of the scores that I wanted to go over with. Let's get these quick comments in before we move on to the non-Division I. Yeah, Tennessee State 2-0 in the OVC. You know, they played that tough non-conference schedule, couldn't get anything done in the SWAC early. They even took that loss to Lane, but it looks like that loss to Lane has forced them to has made them refocus, and they've opened the OVC off to a 2-0 start. Should be 3-0 after they played Murray State. They have a test in 2 weeks there in the OVC. Anything on Tennessee State sticks out to you, Kelvin?
Well, what sticks out to me is what the conversation that we had early, and we said we would actually have to look at, you know, when we rank the teams or when we have our rankings, is that how do we view them, you know, that they're going to play in this OVC. And right now they're third in the OVC. They put up 37 points yesterday on Eastern Illinois. This will be very interesting to see. You know, they scored 3 touchdowns in the second quarter, and, you know, on, you know, multiple, if you look at this, you know, the stats from the game, 309 yards, 3 touchdowns from their quarterback, you know, and, you know, and 3 guys averaging roughly 5 yards a carry on the ground. It's interesting to see how it might show up, and enough to say, where do they fall at in the whole grand scheme? If they win the OVC, are they a qualifier for the FCS playoffs?
Right. Speaking of qualifying for the FCS playoffs, North Carolina A&T with a victory over Robert Morris. Hey, let's be real. It's Robert Morris. It's Robert Morris. Robert Morris is probably one of the worst teams in FCS. I'm going to put this into perspective for you, Kelvin. This is the same Robert Morris team that Delaware State beat, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago? The same Delaware State team that lost to Howard. Not only did they lose to Howard on Howard's homecoming, but they got trounced by Howard on their homecoming. So you got fools go in the MEAC with Delaware State, and then you got an A&T program who's doing pretty much what everybody thought they would do, and going big in the Big South, where ironically, the number 1 and number 2 teams currently in the Big South will face off next week for GHO. That's the greatest homecoming on earth for all those who don't know their acronyms, at North Carolina A&T. So Campbell getting more than his fair share of HBCU homecoming experiences with 2 of them in a row. You know, with them having a brother as a coach and a former NFL player, I wonder if he kind of did that on purpose. Like, I didn't get to go to him when I was playing, but I'm for sure go enjoy me some homecoming now.
Well, I think if we kind of, and I'm noticing a trend with the comments, if we look at this for what it truly is, and you look at the gentleman at Campbell, got the job, done a tremendous job building the program there at Campbell, and you look at what's going on with Eddie George, what's going on across the SWAC and the MEAC, the statement of rising tide will lift all boats has been used and kind of overused. But when you start talking about the economic impact of these scenarios and giving kids an opportunity that, you know, sometimes, and I asked we had 100 recruits on campus at Alcorn State University, and I asked the kid what he thought. And he said, well, I got offers from other places. He said, but I could really see myself playing here almost immediately. Like, it's not that it's going to be given to him, but he said there might be 9 guys coming in at the same space at just say a Southeast Missouri State or somewhere else in the OVC. So when you think about what's going on, I think people need to really take a step back and look at, like, what's going on with the shift in culture and exposure. Someone just commented, you had 60 Minutes one week, Good Morning America at the end of the week, and then leading into homecoming.
And then you got College Game Day coming up this week down for Jackson State Southern game, but we'll get into that a little bit later on in the show.
Right. So I think we have to take a step back, and the one thing that I have noticed about our HBCU comrades and all of those that are in the space, we get very, very emotionally charged about the institutions. And sometimes I think we have to take a global perspective and kind of look at that moving forward.
All right. Well, speaking of moving forward, Kelvin, we're going to take this break right here. And when we come back, we're going to move forward and look at the non-division ones. We've got the CIAA almost sold up. We've got the SIAC almost sold up. We got Langston out there in the West just doing what they do. So when we come back here, we're going to break down the non-Division I schools. You're listening and watching the BCSN SportsWrap. AD Drew, Kelvin Carter in for Brian Fulford. We'll be right back.
This is the BCSN Pod Zone, your place for the news, views, and conversations about all things related to HBCU athletics. Here the BCSN SportsWrap, Dr. Cavil's Inside the HBCU Sports Lab, Knights of the Round Table, the pregame show, the Carlos Brown Show, the ONG Strike Zone, and more in one place. We are changing the way you consume HBCU sports one broadcast at a time.
Maureen is saving big holiday shopping at Amazon. So now she's free to become Maureen the Merrier. Food is her love language, and she really loves her grandson. Like really loves.
Nope. Nope.
Come on, him?
Ooh, I like him.
Quick, the quicker picker-upper. Bounty picks up messes quicker, and each sheet is 2 times more absorbent, so you can use less.
He's an 8.
He's a 9.
Bounty, the quicker picker-upper.
It's never too early to plant the seed, to share the tradition, and instill a sense of pride in your HBCU with your little ones. HBCU Pride and Joy Children's Boutique helps you share your school spirit with a wide selection of adorable kids apparel and accessories officially licensed from your favorite HBCU. Visit hbcupridejoy.com and follow us on all social media at HBCU Pride Joy on Facebook and Twitter.
Time to call a credit repair company to fix my credit. Hold the phone, man. You can do it yourself with Credit Versio. That's way too hard. Call the credit repair company. Most credit repair companies only work on 1 or 2 accounts at a time, making it slow and expensive. You won't figure that out for months. Ignore him. Credit Versio's brilliant software scans all 3 credit bureaus, finds the accounts that are hurting your score, and guides you through the entire process. Anyone can do it. Let's fast forward and see the results.
Wow, I fixed my own credit and saved hundreds.
You can do this. Visit creditversio.com.
It's like a loop machine. All around town, people trying to get down.
Welcome back to the BCSN Sports Wrap. AD Drew here, along with Kelvin Carter, sitting in for Brian Fulford, who's away on assignment this particular weekend. Safe travels there, my brother. Safe travels. Checking in with some of the people who've come in since the first time we had our check-in, Kelvin. Got Israel Carey, got Franklin Kuntz. David Garner's here today. EA, my brother. Any Carrot Kafani is here with us on YouTube. Just going up and down the comments right here. Lawrence is here. Sneaker Shop Talk is here. Of course, I already mentioned Chamber T, Berry 305. So just keep those comments coming. We'll get to you. I know Kelvin is doing a good job over there monitoring the chat, and I am trying to do the same. Let's get into some of the non-Division I schools. Let's start off with my alma mater there, Kelvin, my second alma mater. That being the Tuskegee Golden Tigers, who literally survived a game versus Lane. Tuskegee jumped out early. Lane had the lead at halftime, 17-14. Lane was up 24-21 after 3. Tuskegee scored 14 in the fourth compared to Lane 7 in the fourth. and held on with a defensive stand as Lane pretty much just ran out of time, had to throw a Hail Mary there at the end of the game in order to secure the victory. So, Kelvin, Tuskegee, Lane, which direction you want to go first on this one?
We can go direction with Tuskegee going first. I mean, I think that they played at the Whitehaven Stadium with roughly about 3,000 people in attendance, like you said, with little promotion around that. But hey, Tuskegee's 6-2 overall, 5-0 in the league. Looks like a really, strong showing. They're on the road, actually. So I think that's a game changer. With the way that it kind of played out for them. But I think they did a good job. I wouldn't necessarily call 3,000 people a hostile environment, but
Wait. You talk about 3,000 people in Memphis. That's a hostile environment, my brother.
Oh, okay. I'm just checking. But yeah, I like what I saw, especially in terms of what they did, what they were able to accomplish. And, overall, like I said, I just think they did a good job on the road. Quarterback threw for 218, and ran for another 40. So
that being
I think you guys,
Williams, the quarterback.
Yeah, Bryson Williams. I think you guys are in a good space. And then your running back rush, you had two guys. One guy rushed for 138, and another guy rushed for 100. So
yeah,
I like that.
Yeah, Terrene Taylor is the top rusher for Tuskegee, so he's doing pretty good. That 138-100 was by Lane. That was Kalen Doon and Michael Huntley. Michael Huntley, one of the leading rushers in the SIAC. Ike Brown, one of the leading pass catchers in the SIAC. Also, did not catch a pass on the day, which I find rather interesting. Excuse me. Ike Brown, one of the lead rushers on the day. Huntley is the quarterback. And the quarterback ran for 86 yards and also passed for 202 yards. That quarterback there being Huntley. What I find interesting, though, about Tuskegee is Coach Reginald Ruffin. And I've known Coach Ruffin for at least 15 years, pushing 20 years. And Ruffin, former linebacker coach at Tuskegee, former defensive coordinator at Tuskegee, former head coach there at Biles. The one thing that he's always been prided on is his defense. I don't know if it's because this is his last year. He said, hell, I'm going to have some fun. Reginald Ruffin team, whether he's been the coordinator or been the head coach, has never been the team that was just there going to outscore you. But Tuskegee, right now in the SIAC, is doing exactly that. They are just outscoring people. In this 6-game winning streak that they've had 5 games where they've had over 30 points in those games. 2 of those 5, they scored over 40 points. And not saying that Tuskegee's offense is not like that, but that's just never been a staple of a Coach Ruffin's team. Coach Ruffin usually winds up in the 20s. But here's the thing about it, though. Right now for the season, Tuskegee's averaging 28 points per game, but they're giving up 27 points per game. And that's usually when you see Tuskegee had a difference, or Coach Reginald Ruffin coach team has a difference, is the margin from the offense to the defense. So maybe Coach Ruffin realized, hey, my last year, my defense is not going to be as good as I would like it to be. Won't have time to build it. So we just going to air this thing out, and we're going to just have to outscore people. And it's going to be interesting if Tuskegee should win the SIAC West, how they're going to go against those defenses there in the SIAC East. Primarily Benedict, as it looks like Benedict has all but wrapped up the SIAC East. Moving on, let's stay in the West. Kentucky State, with a dominating performance there on yesterday, as just lost my place on my school. Lost my page on onthedan.com. But Kentucky State picked up the victory on yesterday against. Give me a second.
41-42 against Allen.
Kentucky State. What was that score again, Kelvin?
41-22 versus Allen.
41-22.
Allen.
Yeah. Kentucky State with check that was against Miles. 41-22 against Miles. Kelvin going into Miles on yesterday. And speaking of Allen picked up their first win on yesterday. They beat Bluefield State on yesterday, and they opened up a can on Bluefield State. I believe they put up 50 to 14 against Bluefield State, a team that we and most polls had ranked at one point in time in the season. Great to see Allen pick up their first victory on the season. Looking back at that Allen game, it's kind of easy when your opponent turns the ball over 5 times there, Kelvin, to put up 50 points against them. Just want to throw that out there. Just got to throw that out there. So what it brings up in the SIAC West is basically the showdown this weekend in Frankfort, Kentucky, as Tuskegee travels to Frankfort to take on Kentucky State. Kentucky State with one loss in conference this season, but they'll be going up against an undefeated Tuskegee team. Kentucky State defeats Tuskegee. They will be tied in the conference standings, with Kentucky State owning the tiebreaker going into the last week of the season. As Kentucky State will have Central State the last week of the season, Tuskegee has Miles. Tuskegee defeats Kentucky State. They have sewn up the SIAC West, Kelvin. What are your thoughts about the SIAC West?
So I like where they stand, and I just got one question because I don't know the formality of it. When they play the conference championship, what's the next step for those teams?
And I'm glad you brought that up. I took a look at the projected regional rankings, and if you go to inkblotsports.com, that's INKBLOT sports.com, and go down to Super Region 2 under the football ranking. And they do a very good job of breaking down the Division II rankings, and they're almost 95% of spot on with what the NCAA comes out with. They have 3 of the top 10 teams in Super Region 2 coming out of 4 of the top 10 teams coming out of the SIAC. And if you notice that 6 of the top 10 in Super Region 2 are HBCU schools. And I'll quickly go down for those. We talked about this earlier this morning on Dr. Cavil's Inside the HBCU Sports Lab. You got Benedict currently sitting at number 2. Right. You got Virginia Union, number 4. Fort Valley, number 6. Albany State, number 7. Tuskegee, number 9. Fayetteville State, number 10. What does that mean? Benedict, all they have to do is win. They're in. They're hosting the first round playoff game. They need a little bit of help so they can jump up above Delta State so that they can get their first round bye. Virginia Union in trying to hold on so that they could get a first round game at home. Be careful. I've seen it happen before. Be careful. They may bump Wingate on that last poll because Wingate is the one team that's sitting right there behind them. And just so I could go over it, Delta State is 1, West Florida is 3, Wingate is 5, and Tusculum is 8. Those are the other teams in the top 10 that we left off. Fort Valley, Albany, Kelvin. You know they beat Week 10 in the Fountain City Classic. Benedict win Saturday. Their hopes of winning the SIAC East is over. But that makes their Fountain City Classic even more important. The winner of the Fountain City Classic in Columbus, Georgia on November 5th should be into the playoffs. I say should because we've seen crazier things happen to these teams. Now, the number 9 team, Tuskegee. Should Tuskegee win out and happen to defeat Benedict in the SIAC championship game, Tuskegee will become the preferred qualifier with the earned access. What is earned access? If you don't follow D2 football, you may not understand this concept. To qualify as earned access, you must A, win your conference championship, which Tuskegee could do by defeating Benedict in the conference championship game, and be ranked 9 or higher in the final regional rankings. If you happen to be in that situation, you are automatically in the playoffs. If you're at 8 or 9, you will bump the team number 7 out. That's why I say Albany State and Fort Valley should be in, because if one of those teams happen to be at number 7 and Tuskegee defeats Benedict, Benedict will still be in, but Tuskegee could bump out that other HBCU being Albany State or the Albany State Fort Valley winner. We saw this, I believe this was either 2017 or 2018 when Virginia State was in. Virginia State was sitting in the number 7 spot, and Miles upset Albany State in the SIAC championship game. Miles got in under the earned access and knocked Virginia State out. So we wound up trading HBCUs on that particular day. For Fayetteville State sitting at number 10, once again, an earned access situation. Fayetteville State wins out, defeats Virginia Union in the CIAA championship game. Fayetteville State will get in under the earned access as they should finish 9 or higher. Benedict will probably still get in. They'll probably go on the road instead of being at home. But the question once again is, who would they bump out? Now, here's the interesting scenario, Kelvin. Let's say Tuskegee and Fayetteville State win the conference championship game. Now we're gonna have a little bit of chaos. Now we're gonna have a little bit of chaos because now you lose number 6 and number 7 potentially due to the earned access, because they will qualify as conference champions under the earned access clause. So I hope I didn't nerd out for you there, my brother. You know, when you start talking these stats and numbers and things like that, sometimes I nerd out for you.
Oh no, it's always good because people have to understand it. And what I really like about this too, as I've learned more about the other divisions, that CIAA and the SAIC, is that now that I see those rankings, that's pretty good work institutions at that D2 level. Because if you look at 2, 4, 6, 7, 9 in that ranking, and that means a team that's here in Mississippi
and
that I've seen, and 10, that team that I've seen like Delta State, I'll get a chance to see like, okay, well, let's see how this works out when it's time for them to all bump heads against one another and see how that works.
Yeah, I mean, it's gonna be really interesting to see how this works out. And the one thing is, we hope all of these teams continue to win so that we can force those who vote to make some tough decisions. That's what you want to do. Let's not make it easy for them. Let's not make it easy for them. Speaking of another playoff team, potentially, Kelvin, got the Langston Lions out there in Langston, Oklahoma, who won in overtime this past weekend over Ottawa of Arizona. Ottawa of Arizona came into this game ranked number 17 in NAIA. And for those of y'all, please, 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 do not sleep on NAIA football. NAIA plays some quality football, and I'll be honest with you, a lot of these NAIA teams have come through and beat some of these D2 teams and some of your lower FCS teams. So don't sleep on NAIA football. I mean, the biggest thing between NAIA and D2 is, besides the scholarship differences, is there are a little bit lower academic standards for some of these players to get in. So some of those kids who may have been marginal can get into some of these NAIA programs and still make it to the league via the NAIA program. But looking at this Langston Ottawa game, Langston, okay, Kelvin, I don't know what happened to the defense in this game. Langston, 535 yards of offense. Ottawa of Arizona, 428 yards of offense. I mean, last time I checked, that's 953 yards of offense, man. I don't know when the defense is rested right here, because this was just like going up and down, up and down, up and down. The one thing that hurt Ottawa of Arizona, they had one interception and they lost 2 fumbles on the day. So 3 turnovers compared to 1 turnover for Langston. And whenever you got a game with this much offense and you give the other team extra opportunities, that's a formula for a loss, my brother. Anything that you see in this particular game?
I really like it. The Ottawa team, high-powered offense, and I think sometimes too when you get some kids out there that we oftentimes associate high scoring with lack of defense, but I venture to say it puts a little bit more pressure on a team when you're going to put up points and leave the defense out there a little bit more. So I think as we kind of study and have that conversation about why these scores are just running this high, I just think you got a situation where this is what it is. It's we're going to put up points and then we're going to, at some point, dare these other teams to stop us. And that's what we were seeing. Langston at 6-1 looks very impressive.
Yes. As they took that hard loss on last week and they tried to get themselves back in. Right now, if the playoffs were to occur today, they would probably be just on the outside looking in. But they have the beat of their schedule ahead of them as they have their toughest opponents upcoming. And, how can we forget about the other undefeated HBCU that we have out here? We've talked about Benedict. We've talked about Virginia Union. Excuse me. We talked about Jackson State. Talked about Benedict. Let's talk about Virginia Union right there. And this kid named Jada, I believe Byers. Jada Byers, man, still on pace to hit 2,000 yards. May hit it in the Virginia State game. What would that mean if he hit that in a rival game? But if he doesn't hit it in the Virginia State game, he could definitely hit 2,000 yards in the CIAA championship game. And for those of y'all who do not know, and here I go nerding out again, CIAA championship game counts on his season total stats. And any game that he goes into the playoffs could potentially count on his stats. So if Virginia Union were to make a run, we could see Jada Byers running for 2,500 yards. And possibly the way this brother been running, if they get to the championship game, could you believe this man can run for like 2,800 yards on the season, my brother?
Yes. That alone, I'm saying, is that good level of football that we're seeing at these other levels, and they're undefeated. Put up good totals, 17 in the first half, and scored another 28 in the second half. And I mean, really, put up some really good numbers with about 2,100 in attendance. So I'm anxious to study more over the off season as to what these what's the word I want to use for it? The stadium capacities versus people at the games. I'm really interested in looking and seeing that because that Jada Byers, 40 attempts for 200 yards or 40 attempts for 187 net with a 27-yard long and 4 TDs, and a very efficient game from Jakari Grant, 17 to 25, 236, one touchdown with a 49-yard long in there. So you actually have some pieces in there that are consistent with really, really good football.
Yeah. In Division II football, there are 1, 2, 3, 4. There are 6 running backs that have gained over 1,000 yards thus far this season. Sitting at number 5 on the list is Emmanuel Wilson of Fort Valley State with 1,031 yards. But sitting at number 1 is Jada Byers, 1,560 yards on the season through 8 games. That's 195 yards per game. And trying to do some quick math here in my head, he is 267 yards clear of number 2, who is TJ Cole of Ouachita Baptist. That's in in Arkansas, I do believe. So let's put this into perspective. Jada Byers does not have to run the ball the next game and a half and would still be leading Division II in Russia. Oh, did I say Division II? My bad. We'll be leading all of college football. That's Division I, FCS, FBS, Division II, Division III, and NAIA in Russia. Any last things you want to get out here on the Division II level right now?
No, just really enjoying learning more about this level of football. Always familiar with the names that stick out to you. Learning a lot about these, and also looking forward into transitioning and seeing how these schools also compete and compare when we get into basketball season. So this is a good, interesting transition as we get close to the end of football, but towards that fun time of the playoffs and bowls and Celebration Bowl. So we're going to really see, what this looks like and how our landscape is transitioning with this, reinvigoration or rejuvenation of the historically Black college and university experience and exposure in the network space.
All right, and we are getting ready to take a small break. And when we come back, we're going to bring on the dean of HBCU sports, Dr. Kenyatta Cavil, and we're going to get into talking a little bit more about these playoffs. We're going to get into some rankings and get to some other news and notes here as far as our HBCUs are concerned. You're watching the BCSN SportsWrap. AD Drew here, Kelvin Carter sitting in for Brian Fulford. We'll be right back after these messages.
You see, Head & Shoulders has scalp shield technology, protects against flakes, even between washes. It's never not working.
Kind of like us. Number 15?
Never not working.
I don't like this one.
Me neither.
Let's get out of here.
Head & Shoulders scalp shield, never not working.
This is the Dean of the College of HBCU Sports, Kenyatta Cavil of Dr. Cavil's Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington and Charles Bishop. Come mix it up in the lab where the course lecture is in session every Tuesday from 6 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time on Facebook Live, YouTube Spreaker, or the BCSN app, as we discuss all things about the HBCU sports culture, including exploring the week that was in the sporting HBCU diaspora, as well as the upcoming week of HBCU sports. With me, the Dean, the College of HBCU Sports, on Dr. Cavil's Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington and Charles Bishop. Course lecture dismissed.
Charmin Ultra Soft has so much cushiony softness, it's hard for your family to remember they can use less.
Sweet pillows of softness.
This is soft.
Holy Charmin. Oh, excuse me. Roll it back, everybody. Sorry.
Charmin Ultra Soft is so cushiony soft, you'll want more, but it's so absorbent, you can use less, so it's always worth it.
Now, what did we learn about using less?
You gotta roll it back, everybody.
We all go. Why not enjoy the go with Charmin?
If you think all pads are exactly the same, think again. This is Always Ultra Thins reinvented with the Always Triple Protection System. This pad wicks gushes 90% faster, absorbs even more so you can feel dry, and locks odors in. Rethink your pad for up to 100% leak-free and odor-free comfort with the totally reinvented Always Ultra Thins. This is always like never before.
Follow the Black College Sports Network on social media at MyBCSN1, the number 1, on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at MyBCSN1. This is the BCSN Pod Zone, your place for the news, views, and conversations about all things related to HBCU athletics. Here are the BCSN SportsWrap, Dr. Cavil's Inside the HBCU Sports Lab, Knights of the Round Table, the pregame show, the Carlos Brown Show, the ONG Strike Zone, and more in one place. We are changing the way you consume HBCU sports, one broadcast at a time.
Maureen is saving big holiday shopping at Amazon, so now she's free to become Maureen the Merrier. Food is her love language, and she really loves her grandson. Like, really loves.
Nope. Nope.
Come on, him?
Ooh, I like him.
Quick, the quicker picker-upper. Bounty picks up messes quicker, and each sheet is 2 times more absorbent, so you can use less.
He's an 8.
He's a 9.
Bounty, the quicker picker-upper.
It's never too early to plant the seed, to share the tradition and instill a sense of pride in your HBCU with your little ones. HBCU Pride and Joy Children's Boutique helps you share your school spirit with a wide selection of adorable kids apparel and accessories officially licensed from your favorite HBCU. Visit hbcupridejoy.com and follow us on all social media at HBCU Pride Joy on Facebook and Twitter.
Time to call a credit repair company to fix my credit. Hold the phone, man. You can do it yourself with Credit Versio. That's way too hard. Call the credit repair company. Most credit repair companies only work on 1 or 2 accounts at a time, making it slow and expensive. You won't figure that out for months. Ignore him. Credit Versio's brilliant software scans all 3 credit bureaus, finds the accounts that are hurting your score, and guides you through the entire process. Anyone can do it. Let's fast forward and see the results.
Wow, I fixed my own credit and saved hundreds.
You can do this. Visit creditversio.com.
It's like a loot machine. All around town, people trying to get down.
You see Head and Shoulders?
Welcome back to the BCSN SportsWrap. AD Drew here, along with now Dr. Cavil. You know, Dr. Cavil, everybody loves the backup quarterback, so got to put you in the well. We tried to find a backup quarterback. You know, we had Kelvin came in. He got some snaps early. We're gonna let you come in and mop up duty and see if you can at least earn that number 2 position right here on the SportsWrap. You know, my brother. How you doing today, man?
I'm doing well. Yes, I'll try to make sure I clean it up well so I don't lose my pen and pad, you know, on the sideline. Come in and you do well, you know, and you can do like the Cowboys, I guess, to take it away in terms of their back end and getting it straight for Dak going, 4-1, 3-1. That makes sure that you're on the sideline, that you get to keep the pad and pen for a couple of years and earn that solid paycheck for just sitting over there. I just want the solid paycheck, so I'm good with that.
There you go. I
also want to say that intro.
Oh,
you know, I thought we had one of the better intros, but I'm starting to be like, man, y'all intro is kind of nice too. It get me getting ready.
Yeah, you know, the only thing I like about yours, the one thing I like about yours, you got somebody rapping over yours and doing they singing over yours. So we both got our own little creativity and our own little style and everything. So hey, it is what it is. The important thing is our intro is good enough for people to actually come back and finish watching the show, Doc. That's the most important thing about that intro, though. Yours and mine.
Absolutely.
All right. Yes, sir. Let's get into this this article by Stan Becton. Stan Becton of NCAA.com, and he dropped this article this morning, actually this afternoon at 12:33 on Saturday, October 29th. ESPN's College Game Day preview show will head to Jackson, Mississippi for the Southern matchup versus Jackson State. October's 29th game will mark the first time Jackson State has hosted College Game Day. It marks the second straight year that HBCUs have been on College Game Day after 2021's MEAC SWAC Challenge between North Carolina Central and Alcorn State was on the show last year. Becton goes on to write, the last time an HBCU hosted the show on campus was November 15, 2008, when the show went to Tallahassee, Florida, for Florida A&M's 45-24 win over Hampton. The only other time HBCUs were on College Game Day was in 2013, when North Dakota State hosted Delaware State in a 51-0 win in 2005, and when Grambling State beat Southern 50-35 in the Bayou Classic. That was in 25. So, Dr. Cavil, no one can break this down like you can. Not only do I want you to get into the cultural aspect of HBC college game day coming to an HBCU campus, but I want you to get into the business side of it also, and what this could mean down the line, not only for the two institutions playing Jackson State and Southern, but for some of our HBCUs in general, and specifically within the SWAC.
Yeah, great lead in. One of the things I want to add is great homework done by the NCAA writer there, breaking it down. I would say those first two that he talked about in 2005, 2008 would be pre-Celebration Bowl. You did have the MEAC SWAC Challenge when they brought in Game Day for the North Carolina Central Eagles and the Alcorn State Braves matchup, a couple of years ago. That was significant and big in terms of that. This is huge and extremely significant when you talk about the financial aspects of it. You bring one of the highest ranked Saturday morning shows to your city, to your college campus area, if you would. It's significant in terms of the influence of how many eyeballs will be in regards to the fans. And we know what the fans look like in this particular framework for the institutions. And that is not shown on television very often. So it becomes extremely important to see that and what does it mean in terms of financial wherewithal. So it is going to be very important for the Southern fans and Jackson State fans that will be there. Many of them will be there as early as Thursday. Some will even sneak in maybe Wednesday. But as you know about that matchup, they'll be there early and they'll be in strong, starting to tailgate with their RVs, checking into their hotels, going to restaurants, if you would, in regards to make sure they quench their thirst and their hunger, as well as the bars. But they also need to make sure that they're early Saturday morning with their colors, that you don't have to tell Jackson State and Southern fans. They wear their colors, much like you see with FAMU, a couple other programs around the country in terms of HBCUs that represent, as well as the SWAC, MEAC, SIAC, CIAA. But they need to make sure that they are there with their signs, making their statements, so there's a great representation such that they may be back to some HBCU campus in the near future. And it won't take as long because of the brand of HBCUs, the SWAC, MEAC, for that matter, right? And so when you start looking financially what this means for the impact, we've already heard in terms of the financial impact Jackson State has had on the city. So now you multiply that, if you would, in a multiplicative effect in terms of what that does, and it becomes significant. So you're talking about millions of dollars. The next step is to get those businesses, if you would, to make sure that they're repatriating some of that money directly to Jackson State, more importantly to the athletic program with Ashley Robinson, and even more so to the football program led by Coach Prime, to make sure there's a direct influence in regards to continue the growth. One of the things that we can get in trouble with our programs is when we have a chance for our programs to do well, whether it's winning a homecoming, right, winning a big rivalry game, is not being in a place where we prepare to ask the fans, oftentimes, which are also alumni, businesses to reciprocate in terms of financial support. So our institutions need to be prepared for these big time games, these big time events, whether it's GMA that you saw last week coming into town, those interviews that you've seen in terms of 60 Minutes, is to make sure that when you get the limelight, that you're prepared to financially ask your benefactors to say, hey, we're doing great things. You can see this now based on corporations and institutions coming to us and showing our presentation. So that's when you need to be in a position with a letter going out to your stakeholders to talk about, hey, look what the great things we are doing. This is a great time to support us. These are the plans we have moving forward, right? And this is what our project we want you to support. So write the check, right? And we need to condition our folks to be in position to do that. So it's not so much as you see talking about that GMA is here, but what does this mean to your brand and to financially? Are you writing additional checks because you see the work that is going? Just to say that Good Morning America came and provided extra light is not going to help Jackson State as much as it could if you're writing a check in addition to that. If you see Jackson State on 60 Minutes and they're talking about the SWAC and you're writing checks in addition to what you do because you're excited about the great work, that's how you reinvest in your program in the sustainability in that place. If you don't do that, it becomes a blip. It becomes the de facto high mark and things start to go down, which is what we
like an
talk
outlier.
about in marketing sales, right? And it becomes an outlier versus the sustainability and still on the incline with new projects, meaning people get excited and you continue to see the work. So in marketing, we look at this in terms of the life cycle, right? When you talk about the life cycle of a product or a service, right? When you do all your homework at the beginning, your design is what a lot of folks do. Then you take it to market and it starts to sell. Well, if you're fortunate enough and things go well and you get, individuals, some of those key folks that you talk about, Malcolm Gladwell, that talks about the star folks, the Mavericks, that go in and really take this to the next level, you get the spike. And all of a sudden, in this Maverick, in this case, is Coach Prime, right? This Maverick, in this case for the conference, is Dr. Charles McCullin. So you get this spike. How do you ride that spike and make sure it continues to go up? And even if it does start to level out, right? I'm looking at the illustration to make sure you understand. It's almost like a roller coaster that goes up and comes down. The question is how much of the height can you have on the roller coaster and how much can you extend the length of that ride while it's at its height before it comes down, right? And then you can introduce another product if you're really good with your businesses and you always have a product on the what? The high cycle. And that's what you see with these Power 5 programs in terms of what that looks like. So I'm just making sure that our fans understand the business, that we cannot be in a position where we're just excited to hear that HBCU Game Day is coming to us. And the bragging point that you have is to say Jackson State had this first, or FAMU had this first, or Southern and Grambling had this first. That is the myopic framework of somebody that is new to the business of sport. You have every right to have it, so it shouldn't be a surprise, and you shouldn't be bragging to suggest that you had it first. What you need to be is working the magic of what you justifiably have at your fingertips because you've earned it. Now it's about sustaining it, not being excited because it has, and you can check it off on the box and put it in a folder somewhere talking about you with a first. That's for folks that don't quite understand the business of sports. Now it's about elongation. How do you make this move forward in such a way that it is sustainable, right? That is the innovative mindset of somebody in organizations that have that. And that's what I've seen in a lot of ways with Ashley Robinson, Charles, and Coach, and certainly Coach Prime. He's done that for many moons. But I need to make sure our fans understand how to make sure that they're opening up their wallets, right? Their pockets, their hearts, and giving financially. And I'm not here to tell you how much to give. That's based on you doing the analysis of what is in your budget. But I'm saying that you must give, and you must give routinely, and it has to be above and beyond just buying a ticket. It has to be above and beyond just making sure that you are traveling to see your team. It has to be significant in regards to regular support of your program, whether it's academically or athletically. I would hope it's a little bit of both in terms of the sustainability of where you want to go with both athletics and academics in terms of your institution.
A couple things I wanted to chime in on, Dr. Cavil, on your monologue there. Number one, you talk about support, and this is just a personal pet peeve of mine. I've been just as guilty in the past as the next brother, but The T-shirt man, unless he got that silver that silver sticker on there that says NCAA officially licensed, I doubt very seriously the T-shirt man is giving back to whatever institution that you're going. So please, only buy officially licensed merchandise when y'all going through, because everybody gonna have all kinds of designs. Now, you can buy the other designs, HBCU and whatever. But if it's something that says Jackson State, Southern, or whatever institution that you are from, please make sure that it's a licensed product, so that license fee goes back to the institution. Because I found some great HBCU shirts. HBCU alumni got one that says Black educators are the culture. I picked that up at a football game. But notice what it didn't say. It didn't say FAMU Rattlers are the culture, or Southern Jaguars are the culture. It said Black educators. The stuff that I got that says FAMU, Alabama State, Albany State, everything else had that little sticker on there. And I had to change that mindset a few years ago once I really got into the business side of athletics and realized how much those marketing agreements mean to the university. Buy your stuff at the bookstore. You can buy it at Walmart, because if it's at Walmart, it's officially licensed. Nothing wrong with buying it at Walmart, Kohl's, or some of those other things, because that means at some point in time it was officially licensed merchandise. That's number one. Now, number two, Doc, I want you to bring in you talk about some of the people there and some of the factors there. Two things I want you to hit upon. Number one, College Game Day following Good Morning America. How much does this bring into light some of the circumstances that are going on there in Jackson? Yeah, we know we had the water crisis earlier this year. Remember a few years ago we had the infrastructure problems. They're talking about a new stadium there in Jackson. So these type of events, how much does that bring to light some of those other issues and opportunities for the city of Jackson and Jackson State University? That's question number one. Before I even get into two, I'm gonna let you hit that one. Then I've got one more that I want you to hit on.
Usually, it can bring some light. Usually, good news stations, they'll at least ask the question, and I think Coach Prime has done a really relatively good job of making sure that he talks about the resilience of the people in Jackson and how they want the support and how he hasn't seen the support when you talk about other cities that may not have the large population of African Americans or Blacks Americans, whichever term you prefer. But I think one of the problems that you have, and again, is sustainability. How do you change a discussion into action? And that's one of the things that I continue to push the narrative on, is we must transition from just talk. I love social media. I'm on it. I'm engaged. But we have to get past the need to discuss to death, if you would, for likes and subscriptions, the idea of just the social media platform to talk, to hear yourself talk. It needs to transition to action. Where are you gathering a group of people to put your thought processes into some concerted action, if you would, in regards to that? Whether it is to help the water crisis, whether it's from a political perspective where you actualizing people to go vote, whether you're out there making sure people are educated in terms of what took place actually in the water crisis, what is the historical framework, how this is similar to Flint and other places when you talk about this action takes place, where is the actual responsibility from a local, state, and or federal framework about what took place. And ultimately, it's about financially, how do you support those folks in need as you're talking about this, but how do you move forward where you transition from just talking points to actual action and what that looks like. And so that is extremely important. One thing to close back on your previous statement in regards to understanding the importance about licensed vendors, it does two things. One, obviously, financially licensed vendors has to pay back money to the university, one of the best programs out there for the longest I've seen is Florida A&M, that has put a concerted effort, one, to stop vendors, and two, to make sure that they've educated as much as possible, and probably could still always do better, about its FAMU constituency, the importance about buying licensed vendors. So I used to talk about that in my class with FAMU in terms of our sports marketing, sports brand awareness, about the licensing and how FAMU compared to the larger institutions. And I won't give a number because sometimes we get caught up in saying our institutions are doing better. But I will tell you this, as you would imagine, there's a large gap. But the importance is FAMU has gotten to the table. And other ones are starting to come along, but they've had the highest percentage of HBCUs in terms of the financial numbers that they've gotten from licensed apparel has been better than any other HBCU program. That was at least written in terms of the information that I received from the research to talk to our students about that. So it's extremely important to put those things together and understand, again, it's going to be talking about the action versus not understanding just the talking points.
Yeah. Other question I have for you, Doc. We all know something. You've probably got the two teams right here who travel probably the best within the SWAC. Southern travels very well. We know with Jackson State how Jackson State travels. They just happen to be coming together in Jackson, Mississippi this weekend.
Especially when they're winning.
Especially when both of them are winning. And you talked about it this morning, what the SWAC championship game ramifications are of this particular game. Because if Southern happens to win this game and then both teams win out from that point, that means the SWAC championship game is on the bluff. Versus if Jackson State wins and even if Southern continues to win out, Southern will return to Jackson for the SWAC championship game. But I really want to hit on something with the business community.
And let me put a caveat before you move that forward, because it's important. We're basically saying if both teams have the same record. So
yes,
let's say they already have a loss. Obviously, Southern has a loss and Jackson State is undefeated. So if Southern beats Jackson, they would have one loss. So let's say they end the season both at 7-1. Well, the home game of the championship goes to the team with the best record. Well, they're tied. So the second tiebreaker is if there is a head-to-head contest, who had the head-to-head win? In this case, obviously, Southern would have the head-to-head win over Jackson State. Therefore, they would host the championship game. And so this game is extremely important. And you also have this fact. Alabama A&M, which you're not saying that Alabama would beat Jackson State head-to-head, but they hadn't played. You got to play the game. So
and the game's in Mobile.
Right. And so you have the case, obviously, if Jackson State wins, and even if A&M loses another game, if they beat Jackson State in a head-to-head, they would have the same record, but they would have the head-to-head tiebreaker. And therefore, Jackson State, in that case, wouldn't even make a championship game. Now, that's pretty wild thinking, but I'm sharing you the understanding of why this game is just as important or more important than we normally think about it as just being a rivalry game. It has a lot of implications of how the season will end in terms of what it looks like for a championship.
Israel Carey just chimed in. There will be no seats left at the vet on Saturday. I'll go ahead and take that bet, Israel, with you, man. Yeah, I'm taking the over on that. But what I was getting back to is, the business community there in Jackson. And I'll quickly let you hit on this point before we go to break. One thing that I've noticed, when you have this influx of people into a community for an event, sometimes certain businesses aren't ready, and even if they're ready, they tend sometimes not to welcome the other people. But I was a small business owner at one point in time, and I used to preach this. Yeah, this one event may be stressful, and it may tax our capacity to be able to handle whatever product or service that we may handle. But chances are, those people who are coming in for that Saturday or whatever that event is will visit our city on another time. So it was my job as a small business owner to make that event as pleasant as possible, so the next time that they come to our city, that they would utilize my product and my service at my location. Go ahead, Doc. Give me your 2 cents on that.
Well, in terms of the vendor setup, if that's what you're saying, right?
I'm not only from the vendors, but the small business owners who may have the shops and everything, not only around the stadium area, but just throughout Jackson, that people go. Let's be real. So
that's going to be
people go into the liquor store. People go into the gas. People go into the gas station. People go to fast food restaurants. They're gonna go to sit down restaurants. People gonna be flying in, renting cars. You got people at the hotels. You got the people gonna be cleaning the hotels. There's gonna be a lot of commerce going on this weekend with 60,000 expected in the stadium. You're probably gonna have another 25 to 30,000 outside the stadium, Dr. Cavil. So we're talking anywhere from 80 to 100,000 people that are gonna be in the area surrounding this football game, Doc. That's what I'm talking about, to make sure that those small businesses in that community, you talked about them, the dollars and them giving back, but I also need for them to make sure that they give out good service. And I'm not taking a shot at Jackson, not saying that any business there has bad service.
You're just talking about
like that. I'm just talking about in general, because I have been to certain cities, and y'all know these 60,000 people coming. A, I understand there's a staffing shortage, but B, there's just certain minimum expectations that I give. If I'm going to spend my hard-earned dollars in your establishment, that's just a minimum level expectation that I have to have. Now, I want to get the best, but you got to at least meet my minimum. That's what I'm getting at, Doc.
Oh, for sure. When you talk about that, there's multiple layers to that. Let me make sure I share that out first. Is that those businesses, let's be frank, some of those businesses are going to have their best weekend of the year. They'll make their whole year budget based on one weekend in regards to what happens, and will make their business bottom line and be able to survive in a lot of ways. And in some cases, they'll be able to thrive and make, literally Christmas money if they would. And so it's important that if you want that continued service and your expectation that you want to be a part of good businesses, that you get good service. And part of being good service is going to tie back to not only the alumni giving, but the businesses have to give to the institution. You can't take all this in and not support. And so that's also important for the alumni to start asking those questions. Are you supporting Jackson State University? And how can you show me that? I don't want to just hear, yes, we are. How do you show me that you're supporting Jackson State University? So the alumni, the fans need to be smart, and the university has to be, sharp, along with the athletic department, and almost having a list. If you really want to be good about this, having a list.
Preferred vendor list.
Just like a preferred vendor list. These are your preferred vendors that we ask you to share your resources with that support us directly. So you need to get very businesslike about this whole approach to this, and making sure that all those involved in saying, hey, this is just not a willy-nilly, everybody get on the train and have a kumbaya and take advantage of it. This needs to be strategic in terms of what you look like, and saying, hey, these are the 10, 15 businesses that have supported us over the years in these different ways. We ask you to go support them. This is a great time for that, right? And so that's part of what this whole business thing is about, is understanding how do you get businesses to support you and continue to support you. And then you need to look at those businesses that shut down, and you need to make a to them, which is fine, and make sure that you don't support them not only this weekend, but any other weekend. You need to make sure that information is out there, that you have businesses that are not operating in good faith in regards to supporting you. So you have to make sure that you're communicating the process and the plan. But absolutely, there are going to be some businesses that are going to do really well this weekend, and they need to make sure that the services is up to par to support those that are supporting them and spending their dollars with you, frankly, even more so.
Yeah. And that's why we call him the dean of HBCU sports. He just gave our lecture for the day. let's see, it was extra credit this morning. So what would you call that lecture right there, Dr. Cavil? We did our extra credit this morning. What was this? Be a study session?
Yeah, that's a study session.
Office hours on the BCSN SportsWrap. But Doc, we done nerded out for the last 30 minutes. We need to get back into some football, man. So coming up after this break, man, we are going to talk about, I'm going to put my rankings on you this time. You know, you always give it to me on Tuesdays of Dr. Cavil's poll. We're going to let you react to the BCSN computer ranking. And let you tell me whether I need to go out and give me a new Mac or not, or whether I can go ahead and keep this Mac that I've paid all this money for. And also, we're going to get into some of the matchups that are coming up this Saturday outside of Jackson State and Southern that you need to keep an eye on. You're watching and listening to the BCSN Sports Wrap. AD Drew, Dr. Cavil sitting in. Now Dr. Cavil is sitting in for Brian Fulford, who, let me get this right. Dr. Cavil sitting in for Kelvin Carter, who was originally sitting in for Brian Fulford. I think I got that right. Let me get out of here before I mess something else up. We'll be right back in just a moment.
You see, Head & Shoulders has scalp shield technology, protects against flakes, even between washes. It's never not working.
Kind of like us. Number 15?
Never not working.
I don't like this one.
Me neither.
Let's get out of here.
Head & Shoulders scalp shield, never not working.
This is the Dean of the College of HBCU Sports, Kenyatta Cavil of Dr. Cavil's Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington and Charles Bishop. Come mix it up in the lab where the course lecture is in session every Tuesday from 6 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time on Facebook Live, YouTube Spreaker, or the BCSN app, as we discuss all things about the HBCU sports culture, including exploring the week that was in the sporting HBCU diaspora, as well as the upcoming week of HBCU sports. With me, the Dean, the College of HBCU Sports, on Dr. Cavil's Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington and Charles Bishop. Course lecture dismissed.
Charmin Ultra Soft has so much cushiony softness, it's hard for your family to remember they can use less.
Sweet pillows of softness.
This is soft.
Holy Charmin. Oh, excuse me. Roll it back, everybody. Sorry.
Charmin Ultra Soft is so cushiony soft, you'll want more, but it's so absorbent, you can use less, so it's always worth it.
Now, what did we learn about using less?
You gotta roll it back, everybody.
We all go. Why not enjoy the go with Charmin?
If you think all pads are exactly the same, think again. This is Always Ultra Thins reinvented with the Always Triple Protection System. This pad wicks gushes 90% faster, absorbs even more so you can feel dry, and locks odors in. Rethink your pad for up to 100% leak-free and odor-free comfort with the totally reinvented Always Ultra Thins. This is always like never before.
Follow the Black College Sports Network on social media at MyBCSN1, the number 1, on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at MyBCSN1.
We're back on the Sunday night live edition of the BCSN Sports Wrap. Got the Dean of HBCU Sports, Dr. Kenyatta Cavil, sitting in for my partner Brian Fulford. Earlier we had Kelvin Carter on here, who also sat in for my partner Brian Fulford. Dr. Cavil, my brother. We at BCSN have a supercomputer. That supercomputer is what we do. Use to do the right.
I like it. Supercomputer.
Unlike what you guys do over there inside the HBCU Sports Lab, what we do on HBCU Pro Sports Media, Boxer Roll, and everybody else, we spit these numbers into a computer. We've got an algorithm, and they spit out who is the top ranked. Why did we do that? We wanted to take as much of the human element out of this as we could. Plus, Dr. Cavil, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm a little bit of a stat nerd. So this just gives me something to input into the computer and see what the computer pulls out. You know, I spent that money on an economics degree. I got to use it for something, Dr. Cavil. So
There you
this
go.
is what I decided
That's
to
right.
use it on right now. So with that being said, we're going to start off with the non-Division One computer rankings. Right now, our in the hunt teams. Fayetteville State, 6-2, 5-1, 184 points out of the CIAA. Last week, they defeated Johnson C. Swift, 21-13. This week, they host Shaw for Senior Day. Got Virginia State, 5-3, 4-2 in conference. They defeated Elizabeth City State, 34-12. And this week, they travel to Lincoln of Pennsylvania. They have 179 points, according to the BCSN computers. And by Tuskegee Golden Tigers on a 5-game winning streak that actually should be 6-2 now. They're 4-0 in the SIAC. Excuse me. Yes, that is correct. They're 5-2. Yeah, no, 6-2. 4-0 in the SIAC. They defeated Clark. This is an old graphic that was not updated. They defeated Lane this past weekend, 35-31, and they have Kentucky State this upcoming week. Got to do a better job of updating the graphics, Dr. Cavil. I apologize about that. Anyway, let's go on. Number 5. From out there in Oklahoma, our forgotten HBCU, the Langston Lions, 6-1, 5-1 in conference, 185 points out of the Sooner Athletic Conference. They defeated Ottawa, Arizona, 44-38. That game was in overtime. And this week, they host Louisiana Christian. Coming in at number 4 is the Fort Valley State Wildcats. They are 7-1, 4-1 in conference, 193 points in the SIAC. They defeated Clark Atlanta 41-21 this past week, and they have Savannah State in a neutral site game at the Macon Central City HBCU Football Classic. Oh my God, that was a lot to say. And once again, got another typo. Last week they defeated Savannah State. This week, Albany State has lost my schedule. Albany State had Dr. Cavil, I believe they have. Oh, they've got Morehouse. Morehouse travels to Albany State this weekend for their final home game. That will be Senior Day. Coming in at number 2, no surprise, the Benedict Tigers. Coming in at number 2, they're 8-0, 6-0 in conference. They defeated Morehouse 35-0. And after going to 3 other homecomings this month, Dr. Cavil, that's 3 homecomings in the last 4 weeks, they finally get to host their own homecoming as they've got the Clark Atlanta Panthers coming in for homecoming. And coming in at number 1 is Virginia Union, 8-0, 6-0. 296 points. They defeated Lincoln, PA, 45-20. Have a good Shawan team coming in for Senior Day up there in Richmond, Virginia. And there you have it, Dr. Cavil. Here are the 5 all on one screen for you. So, Dr. Cavil, as you take a look at that, what do you say about my computer? Can I keep it, or do I need to go ahead and put it in the recycle bin, Dr. Cavil?
I think I'm going to allow you to keep it. I will say this, that when you compare it to the poll that I put together, the top 5 teams I think are pretty solid. We have the same top 5 teams. We have
same
the
order?
same. No, that's what I was doing. Jump to 3, 4, and 5 is a little different order, so we can get into that mix a little bit. But I also want to say that the computers are right on the money, at least the way I see it, with the top 2 teams. So the discrepancy is from 3 to 5, and I'll tell you the difference. And it's not a lot there, but it is some difference. I have Albany State, if you would, at number 5, with them coming in now moving to 6-2. So this is last week, so there might be some changes because the poll comes out on Tuesday. Now, I'm looking at last week. I do know those teams stayed in the top 5 in terms of recruit ranking, but they might change a little bit. But from last weekend, which all these teams won, so it's not going to be a lot of changes, as I said. But I see Albany State, Golden Rams, in terms of those people there, no first place votes, with 60 points. And number 4, Langston is in the place. So I have Albany where you have them 3, I have them 5. Langston where you have them 5, I have them 4. And then I have Fort Valley State where you have 4, I have them at number 3. Neither of them have first place votes. That only goes to the top 2 teams, but they do have 82 points. Now, Fort Valley moved last week where they were 5 the previous week, right? All the way up to number 3. Langston, because their loss dropped to number 4, and Albany State, obviously, from their loss, dropped from 4 to 5. So that's a little bit about the poll here that you see in your computer rankings. It may not count a loss, depending on who it is, as hard as a fans and voters would in the poll rankings. If your last game is a loss, oftentimes they will count it a little more harder on you versus than what a computer ranking, because it's taking all the numbers in the matrix and putting together. It's not looking so much and saying, hey, when you had the loss. All it's calculating is the number of losses, not necessarily win. So that's one of the things that I do like about the human element, that it takes, in fact, in terms of when you lost versus
and how you lost.
Not only who you lost to and the style that you lost, which the computer will take fact a little bit about that, because they'll look at the strength of schedule in terms of who you lost to. So it does have an algorithm in there. So I like that. So we do have a computer component in our poll. It's just a percentage of it, with the human element having a larger percentage.
I got you. Now, Dr. Cavil, this is where you may be able to come with some of the professorship and give my computer a argument. Now, keep in mind, Dr. Cavil, it's hard to argue with the machine, but I've seen people do it. So I just want to put that out.
Now, I'm not going to argue with the machine. I got to make sense.
You just going to argue with the inputter?
No, I'm going to pull the plug. And then I go argue with the person that input the data.
All right. Let's see if you got any arguments on this one. All right.
Sure.
Our in the hunt teams. North Carolina Central, 5-2, 1-1, 195 points. Southern, 5-2, 3-1, 189 points. Alabama State, coming off the bye, they're 4-3, 3-1, 185 points. Not a lot of difference between those 3 in the hunt teams. Before we move to the top 5, Dr. Cavil, tell me what you think about those 3 teams right there as our in the hunt teams, and who you may think you may see in that top 5 now that you've seen these 3.
I'm going to be fascinated to see who you got in the top 5. It's probably going to be like a North Carolina A&T or Tennessee State, because they probably have more weighted versus Southern that has the 2 non-FCS teams on their schedule, while Tennessee State would have 1. I think A&T had 1 versus the 2, and both of those teams had Division II, while Southern had a NIA team on the program, and then they had a program that is not even measured in terms of what we call unaffiliated Virginia Lynchburg. So that's probably going to be some things there. Human element, we put more value in terms of who you played, because it's a week-to-week thing, and it will be adjusted. At some point, you'll get a chance to play somebody good and prove your worth. For example, what's going to take place this weekend with Southern travels to Jackson State. And we will get the eye test of a good team, if you would, at least measured in the rankings. We know it, or at least what we call a top 10 team, even if they're outside of the top 5, to what many people perceive to be the number 1 team for just about most polls out there. We'll see if that holds true for the computer rankings here. So it'll be interesting to see who the top 5, because then I'll tell you my top 5. And I think we will be able to get into some more earnest dialogue on this one, particularly when I see that you have 2 of the teams that I have in the top 5, at least last week. And I can tell you this week that even though North Carolina Central lost, the way they lost on the road, that they're not going to likely fall out of the top 5. So it's going to be fascinating to see what that looks like, because I have at least two differences already off the bat in terms of the top 5 race.
All
I
right,
agree
well,
with
here
you.
we go,
Alabama State is outside of it.
Yeah. Well, got to agree with something. All right, well, here we go, Dr. Cavil, and you are absolutely correct. North Carolina A&T is in the top 5. North Carolina A&T State coming in with 195 points after their victory over a lowly Robert Morris team. And what's interesting is Campbell gets to do 2 homecomings in a row, 2 HBCU homecomings in a row, as they go to G-Ho. That's the greatest homecoming on earth. For those of you all who do not know, shout out to JB Walker of Black College Sports Network. But yeah, Campbell will travel to Greensboro for G-Ho this week. So that's our number 5 team, Dr. Cavil. Coming in at number 4 out of the Ohio Valley Conference is Tennessee State. 3-4, 2-0 in conference though. 2 of those 3 wins have been in conference. 205 points. They defeated Eastern Illinois 37-17. And for all intents and purposes, Dr. Cavil, they should get this victory this week against Murray State. Here's where the surprise comes, Dr. Cavil. Number 3, Florida A&M. After the bye week, did not move because North Carolina Central was our number 2 team last week. So they stayed at number 3. FAMU is 5-2, 3-1. They had a bye this week. They've got Arkansas Pine Bluff coming in with the interim coach for homecoming. Y'all see how that was going to work out for you there for the Golden Lions. Well, let me rephrase that. Y'all going to see how we hope that's going to work out there for the Golden Lions as I put my FAMU hat on for you. So, Dr. Cavil, that means we have a new number 2 team. And this team is actually entering the computer rankings for the first time this year. That being the South Carolina State Bulldogs at 3-4, 1-0, 211 points as they defeated Central 26-24 at home. And don't sleep on Morgan State. They will be tested against Morgan State and Coach Damon Wilson is one thing I know about this Damon Wilson-led team. They may have the cornerbacks that can play with a guy named Shaq Davis, as they have some taller cornerbacks there at Morgan State. And the most anticlimactic portion of the poll, Dr. Cavil, is our number 1 team, that being Jackson State. 6-0, 4-0, 268 points, defeated Campbell 22-14, and they host Southern on senior night this Saturday. So, and Jackson State's actually 7-0. So, Dr. Cavil, here's the master sheet. Let me go back over these in reverse order. A&T is 5, Tennessee State 4, FAMU 3, South Carolina State 2. The I Love is number 1, Dr. Cavil. Let me have it. Wait a minute. Pregnant pause. A pregnant pause is never good coming from a professor. I just want y'all to know that. I know that for being in school too long. A pregnant pause is never good after a presentation. That means either you wowed the hell out of them, or you came up with something like, you're going to have to really explain that one to me for me to give you a grade. I think I know which way we're leaning on this.
This is wild. You have 2, not just 1. You have 2 teams with a losing record in the top 5. I refuse to put losing teams in the top 5 poll. That just makes no sense to me. I mean, you got to win. And both of these teams, one of their wins are against less than FCS programs. So they're getting credit, which is amazing to me when you think about South Carolina State. Where was North Carolina Central last week in the top 5?
North Carolina Central dropped from 2 to essentially number 6.
Week?
Yes.
Wow. So think about this now in terms of computer records. We're going to have to go check out some of these algorithms in there and tighten them up a little. We got a team that was at home taking on the number 2 team. They beat them by 2 points at home with a losing record, and they jumped to number 2. That's wild to me.
Yeah.
And even my phone is like, man, wake everybody up. Like, this is news. So I don't understand these computer rankings. It's trying to get it. So that's it. Then you got Tennessee State that lost. Not only did they play a Division II, but they lost at home to a Division II team. And they find their way after they win 2 games, including one of them against a team that was essentially winless. They find their way into the ranking. I don't get it. I can see. I don't even believe Tennessee State will be in the top 10 rankings as I see next week. I think they'll be receiving votes. They get another victory, go to 500, and a couple other teams lose. I can see them jumping in the top 10. But for them to jump in the top 5 is just amazing to me with the losing record. And I'm like, wow, how does that happen in terms of that? So last week's poll I had, and obviously the teams lost, so just to give some people some things to think about. I had last week Southern Jaguars at 4-2. Obviously, they win this weekend, so they're not going to drop down in this week's poll. Then you had Delaware State that was 4-2. Where was Delaware State last week? Were they ranked in the top 5 anyway?
Delaware State, I believe, was 4 or 5 last week.
Right. All right. So they fall out, and that's how they made room. So I can see that. I can see Delaware State after the loss on the road that they fall out of the top 5 in the human poll rankings this week. So I can agree with you there. FAMU, that was not really a surprise to me. I had FAMU ranked 3 last week. So I can see FAMU actually jumping up to 2 after North Carolina Central lost in terms of that. They're on, a 5-game win streak, 4-game win streak, playing really
5.
well in terms of what they get done, 5. And so even though they were off this week, they'll get a chance to make a statement against Southern that will probably still be in the top 10. Certainly if they win, they'll be top 5. Even if they lose, depending on how they lose, you got to imagine that they'll be at least top 10. They might fall out of top 5 if they lose bad.
Got to take care of UAPB before we get to Southern, though.
Yes.
UAPB this week,
I was talking
Southern
about
next
with
week.
them after this week, they'll play Southern. And
Right.
FAMU this week has UAB. Even though they got a new coach, I don't see that as a problem, especially with a week off for FAMU homecoming. They would just have to really have a turnover.
Both teams actually coming off a bye.
Right. But one of them is coming off a bye with the new coach that just got the call that they would be a new coach on, Monday, Tuesday this week? So there's not going to be a lot of changes there. You might get a little pep with the new guy, but my understanding, the players learned about this by the phone, so it wasn't like they were asking for it, and they were pretty close to the coach. So I can't see that much of a lift in terms of the coach coming in. So it'll be fascinating to see, but I just can't see Pine Bluff getting well against FAMU on the road, if you would, in terms of that. And then North Carolina Central, it'll be interesting to see if they fall out of the top 5. It's hard for me to believe that you fall out of the top 5 when you go on the road and lose to a team like South Carolina State that a lot of people think are really solid. The way you lost,
you essentially had a chance to win.
Yeah, they had a chance to win the game, so it's hard for me to see them necessarily dropping out of the top 5. So those are the things that kind of stand out to me in the poll rankings, the computer. And again, that's what happens when you take out the human element. All it just sees is pure data and numbers. And it can shift it anywhere. And so it doesn't care. It's going to plug and chug. It's going to take away the fact that your wins are not against FCS. It's not going to worry so much about losses to non-FCS. So you get pure just numbers. From that standpoint, I can see why it did what it did. But I'm fascinated about this week. Usually I'm pretty good. And I think y'all do pretty on it for the computer. This week I'm like, wow.
Yeah. And they've explained there's a couple of things.
Let me unplug the computer.
The computer does factor in the level of the competition, whether you play the FBS, FCS, at D2, NAIA, or in what's hurting Southern this time, the fact that they played an unaffiliated team in UVA Lynchburg. So it does make adjustments for those things. But the one thing that this formula does, what did Coach Connell Baylor say? I get paid to win conference championships, correct? Did he say something? I'm paraphrasing, but that's pretty much what he said.
They don't pay me to They don't pay me to win those games. They pay me to win conference games. That's right.
Well, guess what our computer does? Our computer expects these teams to win conference games. So when you go back and look at it, when you look at the conference record of 4 of the 5 teams in our top 5, they're undefeated in their conference. Now, granted, South Carolina State only has 1 data point, but they've got a win percentage of 100. So the computer recognizes that win percent of 100, not only for South Carolina State. Jackson State has a win percent of 100 in conference. Tennessee State has a win percent of 100 in conference. And North Carolina A&T has a win percent of 100 in conference. So for that one metric, all 4 of those teams are exactly the same, with Florida A&M coming in with a win percent of 75%. So just kind of taking you behind the numbers a little bit in the rankings. That's how the undefeated conference team, despite being under 500 overall, our computer metric weighs a little bit more heavier on conference wins versus your overall
I like that. See,
weight.
somebody smarter always gonna jump in there and mess your little computer stuff up. Say Howard is undefeated in the MEAC too.
Yeah, but Howard was
They are.
Howard was too far down in the rankings.
Yeah, right. But this is what I would say about.
I would not. I got 2 hours of
battery.
battery, Tamara T. I got 2 hours of battery, so even if I unplug,
we're gonna take out the batteries too. We're gonna take out the batteries too. And then don't make us bring in the back. That's when we really get frustrated.
Take the motherboard
But
out.
what I would say about that is that does make sense what you just said. I will say that in terms of understanding analytics, at least from this perspective, is that if that is in your formula, it does make sense. This is where I would push back. Also, as a data analytics, that means that variable is weighted too high. And so,
and it possibly could be.
So to go back, and that's the good thing about when you learn about computers. You might not do it this year because you want it, to be symmetric throughout the year, right? But one of the things now that you go back and see is Twitch, the metric. And so I think one thing you may want to consider is the weighted variable you have for how you do in conference measures in terms of conference wins, such that it wouldn't skew it. And that's me, from my perspective, saying why those teams are higher than what I would put them, because that metric has skewed towards the weighted variable. And it could have been what you wanted, but that's why I would say it'd be off, and one thing to consider.
Yeah. And
I love this kind of conversation. I can do this all day now. Data analytics.
And the thing is, if Dr. Cavil and I were to get into this conversation on a serious matter, because we having fun with it right now, we would nerd most of y'all out and bore a lot of you all.
Right, everybody be like, all right, that's too much, we gotta go. So we want to do that.
Because we've had some of these conversations off camera and behind the scenes, but we talked about different things like that when it comes to data analytics. That's why Dr. Cavil does what he does with the data analytics, and he's a paid consultant. He does this stuff for a living. I do it for fun. He does it for a living. Now, if you need somebody to help him out with a paycheck, brother, you know my phone number. Anyway.
I like that.
Yeah. Dr. Cavil, before we get out of here, any particular matchups that you're looking forward to this upcoming week? Let's start off in the non-division ones first, if you would, Dr. Cavil. Any matchups there, SIAC, CIAA, NAIA matchups that you're particularly looking forward to this week?
I'm going to go into that SIAC first with Tuskegee and Kentucky State. That potentially depends on what everybody votes coming into. Tuskegee's going to be top 10. But there's a chance that Kentucky State, based on their last win and a couple of wins they had, that they could jump into the top 10 with some of those other teams losing this past week, including Bowie State, which was a tough loss, right? Lane with their loss, they might fall out of the top 10 with those losses, and Kentucky State may jump in there. So that means that you would have a top 10 matchup that basically is going to decide who is coming out of the West Division at SIAC. Obviously, there's another game left, so some things can change just slightly. But for the most part, whoever wins this game really is in the driver's seat in regards to who's going to win the West. So that's the game I think you should have focus on. Both teams are playing really well. Tuskegee has to go on the road. They just got a huge road win against Lane, so they're going to be confident in that game. And then Kentucky State, in terms of what they've been able to do the last couple of years, even though it's a new coach, they're going to be comfortable, and they want to make that step to get into the SIAC championship and take their chances with Benedict. It looks like it's going to come out of the East in terms of what they're going. And so that's fascinating to me. I have an eye out on that Fort Valley State, Savannah State game that you talked about a little bit earlier. Keep your eyes on. And it's less in terms of obviously the conference race, but more in terms of what this may mean in terms of the last game, which were Fort Valley and Albany State. Both of them come in there winning. The winner of that game probably is going to be very strong to get the Division II playoff assertion in terms of being in that top 6. And so I think that's a really important matchup. And so I kind of have my eyes on that. That's more as a fan just to see how many HBCU teams can get in the playoffs, what that looks like. So I'm focused on that. Obviously, we think so highly of Virginia Union, number 1 in our polls, in most people's pick. But they have a big game this weekend, and it's for the Northern Division. So Shawan can win this game, then they can find a way and sneak in, for a lack of better words, to the CIAA, because if both teams went out in that, they would have the head-to-head matchup, and both of them would be with one loss. They would go to the championship game instead of Virginia Union, which would be crazy for most people to even think about. But that's the game I have my eyes on. Shawan got a big win, surprised most people over the Bulldogs of Bowie State. So they obviously playing really well. They do have that conference loss earlier and don't come in necessarily with a record that would pause, but just because the way it's set up in the divisional race, this all of a sudden becomes an extremely important game. So this is another game that I have at the mid-major level focus. Obviously, Langston got the big comeback win, and so just because I want to see if they can continue to win out, which will put them in pretty good position to see about getting the NIA bid, I quietly have my eyes over there as well. But those are the teams I say watch out for. My biggest eye is going to be on Kentucky and Frankfort, Kentucky, in terms of that Kentucky State Tuskegee matchup.
All right. What about for the Division I or FCS or major, as you like to call them, there inside the HBCU Sports Lab?
Thank you. Yeah, in terms of that, obviously the big game that everybody should have your eyes on. I told you the fans need to be there for college game day from 8 to 11. They need to be loud with the signs, the colors on, making sure everybody knows the presence of Jackson State and Southern around the nation of how big this rivalry game is. And it's a good one. Southern is playing really well of late, being able to score. Second scoring in the conference in a lot of ways. Both teams are ranked high in terms of the conference. FCS division, Jackson State is up there on the defensive side. We know what Shador can do. This is a classic matchup between these two teams. And let me put this on the table, that this is similar to what we just talked about, that Virginia Union and Shawan game. This could have implications not only in terms of who goes to the championship game, but it could be also who hosts the championship game. Who would have thought that the way that Jackson State was playing? Almost everybody saw de facto that not only Jackson State would be in the championship game, but they would most likely host the championship game as they try to get back to the Celebration Bowl. And it looks like now they might have a chance at a revenge game against South Carolina State, with, according to the poll rankings, was an upset, even though many Bulldog fans thought that they would go in there and at home at least, and get that win against the Eagles of North Carolina Central. So that is a game that I really will be focused on for many different reasons. In the suite, as I'm down there at Prairie View, watching Prairie View host Bethune-Cookman, that also has an eye on that game in terms of them wanting to find a way to get back and take another shot at Jackson State. If Jackson State wins that game, all of a sudden, Southern has 2 losses, and Prairie View, if they win, vote back into first place alone with just 1 loss and have all the cards in the deck in terms of finish out the season with Alcorn coming in there the following week. So it's still a very tight race. And just to talk about a team behind the scene that is quietly looking at what's going on, oh, yeah, you got the Magic City Classic with Alabama State Hornets and Alabama A&M Bulldogs, which is another game that's probably going to have 50,000 plus fans along with the game in Jackson. But this game is also important in terms of a new coach. Maynard has his team playing well. He wants to get to 500 overall. He wants to continue to chase and have a shot at Jackson State in a couple of weeks in Mobile. He only has one loss in terms of the Bulldogs. So they're not out of the race. They would have the head-to-head tiebreaker if they can win out. And Jackson State only has the one loss. So that's a game that's important to keep your eyes on in a lot of ways as well. So a lot of things going on next week that you cannot take your eyes off the ball in terms of what's going on there. And quietly, I think that Alcorn Grambling game is going to be intriguing. Alcorn certainly can't take another loss. There's some scenarios where possibly with 2 losses, they can still find their way in the game, but they can't afford another loss. They have to win out. But Grambling is always a tough place when you talk about historical factors for the Braves to go in there and try to get that win. So just because of that, in terms of a rivalry aspect, I quietly have my eyes looking over there to see if Grambling can right the ship and get their conference win. They're playing much better. We saw what they did a couple of weeks ago against FAMU and all but had that win, couldn't get it done. So I'm fascinated to see, can they get over their hump, proverbial hump, and get that win. And then obviously you go into the MEAC, and the game I have there in terms of the matchup is fascinating to me in a lot of ways. It's not necessarily the South Carolina State and Morgan State game. That is interesting just to see if South Carolina can continue to win. But you probably see them find a way to get that. It is on the road, so I guess you pause. But the other game is North Carolina Central and Delaware State. That's still probably going to be 2 top 10 teams. Both of them have 1 conference loss. So whoever loses this game is certainly out of the race.
It's done.
You know, you would put a question with 1, but certainly with 2, you're done. Delaware State, although they have 1 loss, they still have South Carolina State ahead of them. So if they could be the team to give South Carolina State the 1 loss and they keep with 1 loss, they would have the head-to-head tiebreaker. So they certainly can't afford to lose this game. So it's going to be fascinating to me who can find a way to keep themselves in the race between North Carolina Central and Delaware State after both teams were upset, at least in terms of the poll rankings, in terms of those teams both being top 5 teams at the time. In many people's poll rankings, certainly our poll rankings, they were both told, and even in the computer rankings, as you said, both of those teams were top 5. So that's going to be fascinating because one of those teams with a loss is likely to fall out of the top 10 after 2 weeks of going from top 5 to out of the top 10. That's going to be fascinating talking points, especially if it's Delaware State. They probably fall out. North Carolina Central has a little more room for error, so they might still fall on the way. But 2 straight losses, you talking about ruining the season for sure. And it also takes North Carolina Central out of any hopes of an FCS playoff if they lose this game. If they're able to win out and can't find a way to get some help from South Carolina State, they still can position themselves potentially for a playoff, particularly if New Hampshire continues to do well in the Colonial, the team they beat that was top 25 that is moving up the rankings in terms of what they do. They would have that win. So if they can find a way to sit at 9-2 at the end of the season in regards to that, it'll be fascinating to see what that looks like. So I think that is a fascinating matchup. Obviously, in terms of the independent, you see why they call me the professor and the doctor, because I love them all. You got to see if Tennessee State can justify being top 5 in the computer rankings. They need to win. You'd imagine they're going to win this weekend because they play Murray State, and I don't think Murray State has a win on the season, if I'm not mistaken. I think there's something as
0-7 or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, 0-8, I think, overall, and then 0-3 in the race. So Tennessee State gets a chance to get to 500, go to 3-0, and then they find themselves in a really good position the following week to make things interesting when they will play Southeast Missouri, who is currently at 6-1. You would imagine that Southeast Missouri has a chance to win next week as they play Eastern Kentucky 4-3. So you could talk about a 500 team, 3-0 in Tennessee State facing a 3-0 Southeast Missouri team that would come in at 7-1. So that's a big matchup. So Tennessee State has to get it done this week to make that game mean anything the following week in terms of what that matchup. So I have my eyes on that. And obviously the second biggest independent, or really the biggest independent matchup, is North Carolina A&T in the Big South in terms of them playing Campbell. We saw Campbell show why they are certainly a big-time caliber opponent in terms of what they were able to do to a top 10 team in Jackson State, even though some of that was inflicted by Jackson State not being able to score in the red zone. A problem that they've had all season long. We'll see if it ever hurts them in terms of not being able to cash in on the points. The big thing that I think you talked about earlier in the show that I really like that you brought out is that they've graded their kicker, and they're at least able to get 3 points out of that, which is putting them in place to win those games. So I think it's going to be fascinating when you talk about that Campbell going into the greatest homecoming on earth, the second homecoming. They got experience with a hostile environment, an HBCU program, where that helped them more so in a conference game. So I'm fascinated to see with North Carolina A&T that has been playing lights out over the last couple of weeks in terms as they have righted their ship, it seems 4-3, and want to hold on to a championship in their last season in terms of football in the Big South. Obviously, all their other sports are already in the Colonial with not getting much respect in terms of men's or women's basketball. That's another conversation. And being drugged in a lot of ways in volleyball as well. But with that being said, that would be my final game that I keep my eyes on at the FCS level. Fascinating what's going on there. Obviously, you're going to poke a little eye over there with FAMU, their homecoming, just because it's funds. But I don't see them having any problem with Pine Bluff, the Golden Lions.
I'll be in Tallahassee for homecoming, and I'll be watching that. And then got a side eye on the Tuskegee Kentucky State game. And before we get out here, Doc, you mentioned some of those scenarios in the BAC, but wouldn't it be just like the BAC for all those teams to finish 5-1 or let's see, 5-1? You have to go 4-1 or 3-2.
Delaware State, South Carolina State, and North Carolina Central. For those three to finish 4-1.
Yeah,
and then you got to go to a 3 scenario with Delaware State beating South Carolina.
It's the BAC. Yep. It's the BAC. Anything can happen.
Central
in the BAC.
Beating Delaware State, but South Carolina State being Central. Yeah, that'd be fascinating to see. And both ways, I think, will do well for the Eagles because of the point differential in those games, and they probably would likely be ranked higher in any of the rankings that are out there. That would probably give them the nod.
Yeah. So that, but like we said, that would be so BAC-ish. And flipping over to the SWAC West, Dr. Cavil, and I've said it. I don't know if I've said it on your show, but I've said this a couple of times. Notice everybody in the SWAC West already has one loss. Go ahead and mark my word. Everybody in the SWAC West will have at least another loss before the season is over with. The best record that you're going to get out the SWAC West champion is going to be a 6-2 record. And it would not surprise me, Dr. Cavil, if we've got multiple teams in the SWAC West tied at 5-3 at the end of the season. And we got to go about 3 or 4 tiebreakers into the SWAC office before we figure out who's going to be traveling to the SWAC East champions, Dr. Cavil. I really see that much parity in the SWAC West that a 5-3 record with a 2 or 3-way tie, and somebody's going to have to become the champion on paper in order to go and play the SWAC East opponent for the SWAC championship.
I think that's a little harder for you to get the MEAC-ish in the SWAC-ish to become the SWAC-ish, if you will, in the Western Division, using your framework and everything. And the reason is I think the schedule for Prairie View, unless they really fall apart this weekend, 3 of their 4 opponents have losing records and not playing really good football. And they have 2 of them on the road, which makes it a little tougher. But they have Valley, Pine Bluff, and Bethune-Cookman. The strongest opponent they have is Alcorn, which is at home on that Friday night. So I think it'll be interesting to see if they get the 3 losses. Now, a couple of other teams, Southern, Alcorn, just because of the strength of the schedule, and Texas Southern for that, I can see them ultimately with 3 losses. But it'll be intriguing to see if that happens to Prairie View. I can see Prairie View kind of sneaking in the back door,
At
as they used to
6-2.
say, with 6-2, finding a way back to the championship game, and the other 3 teams just on the outside looking in because they're all at 5-3.
Yeah, but Dr. Cavil, and we'll get out of here on this. How many times in the SWAC have we seen that team who should win go on the road to somebody and wind up losing on the road? Freak injury, controversial call, anything happens, especially when you're on the road. So, and the trap game that I see from Prairie View, and I don't know what order they play in, but them traveling all the way to Bethune, it's just something about that trip from Texas to Florida that I see
Bethune,
as a.
I would agree with that, but Bethune game is this weekend is homecoming, and it's Bethune coming to Prairie View. It's the
Okay,
Valley
I
and the
thought they
Pineville
traveled too.
games on the road. So that's what I'm saying. Arguably two
Okay, I
of
got
the
you.
least resistant teams that are not playing really well right now, those are the teams they have on the road. So Prairie View schedule, and that's what I told. Remember when I told everybody to look at your schedule at the very beginning of the season? Now, I was wrong about Prairie View, and I said they had the easiest schedule in terms of surprising some folks, but I didn't think they would take it too highly. But they started off so hot. Now the schedule is likely to play in their favor. They got the toughest opponent, with a game Bethune-Cookman is always talented coming there. They got them for homecoming, and then they got Alcorn at home on a Friday night. But the other 2, Valley and Pine Bluff, who they got on the road. Now, like you said, anything can happen. But at that point, they're going to be really focused because they're going to have all the chips in their own pocket. And that's why I said that becomes difficult to see them losing those games at the end.
Would it be swackish if Prairie View goes to Valley and Valley gets the only win against Prairie View? I'm gonna get out of here on that with Dr. Cavil. I just had to throw that out there at you because I know you're Prairie View alone. Hey, Dr. Cavil, tell everybody where they can find you, find your show, and what we may have coming up on inside the HBCU Sports Lab this week.
Yes, Tuesday and Thursday, you can catch us live on Facebook at 6 o'clock Central Standard Time. You can get it on demand on YouTube. Also, whenever you want, as we post it that night after the show debuts at 6 o'clock Central Standard Time on Tuesday and Thursdays. We will do our traditional matchup of the HBCU News of the Day. We'll give you the poll rankings on Tuesday, both mid-major and major division. As we kind of told you what's likely, but we'll give it to you officially. And then we'll get into the second half of the show. We'll look at the mid-major game of the week, and we have some good ones, as we talked about on here. We'll take a deeper dive and see what some other of our colleagues thinks about some of those key matchups. And then the final segment, we will do the major division. We flip over to Thursday. We'll give you some more HBCU news to see what has changed in terms of what it looks like. We'll get into the marching sport rankings, which will be interesting this week, as we may have some changes. And we'll talk about the big battle, which is the Boombox Classic, as some people have named it, which will, as it did last year, likely feature who's going to really put themselves at the forefront in terms of winning the poll rankings in terms of the marching sport with the Battle of Southern and Jackson State. So Sonic Boom of the South and the Jukebox in terms of what will get down there. We'll discuss that a little bit, and then we'll get into our final mid-major and major games of the week, which will feature conference games. We'll get into the SIAC game of the week, CIAA game of the week, SWAC game of the week, and then MEAC game of the week, and we might throw a bonus game in there for you just to consider. And then obviously on Sunday, as all the action takes place on Saturday, we'll wrap it up and tell you what our thoughts are on Sunday morning at 9 a.m. Central to tell you what happened and then give you a prelude of what to expect in the upcoming week as well. So that's our full lineup. Excited to give you a chance to kind of plug that. Check us out for those that may not. And if you do, for those lab listeners, appreciate all the support.
And go ahead and get those handles out, Dr. Cavil.
Dr. Kenyatta Cavil on Facebook, Instagram, as well as Twitter. That's Dr. Kenyatta Cavil. Again, that's Dr. Kenyatta Cavil.
All right. And catch us right here on the Black College Sports Network. Hey, speaking of the Black College Sports Network, you can catch the audio version of this podcast. Download the BCSN Pod Zone, available everywhere that you get your podcast. Apple, Spotify, Anchor, Breaker, Google. We're all over the place with the podcast. So please download the BCSN Pod Zone. Not only can you find Dr. Cavil's Inside the HBCU Sports Lab from this morning, but you'll also be able to find this podcast. Both of those will be uploaded on tomorrow. Also, while you're at it, the best way to keep up with us, though, Dr. Cavil, is to download the BCSN app. Download it to your phone, your tablet, your iPad. Download it. Stay up with us. We have all the games that you want to see. Also, while you download the BCSN app, download the HBCU League Pass Plus app also, as we are a great partnership with HBCU League Pass Plus. BCSN SportsWrap. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at MyBCSN and the number 1. You can hit me up personally, AD Drew, at BCSN Drew. That's at BCSN DREW on Twitter. Want to thank my first guest, Kelvin Carter, for jumping in at the last minute for me, get me through the first hour. Also want to thank you, Dr. Cavil, for jumping in for the second hour. Supposed to be the second hour to turn into the second hour and a half. I'm pretty sure Brian is going to appreciate that for you. Godspeed to Brian as he's traveling. He's having to do some things with his family this weekend. Hopefully, Brian should be back in the chair next week. Also, you can catch him Wednesday on the ONG Strike Zone, as they really will get into it, as they'll get into everything you need to know about the FAMU homecoming coming up this weekend. Carlos Brown on Saturday, right here on the Black College Sports Network. That is from 12 to 2 Eastern. That's 11 to 1 Central. The pregame show comes on at 9:30 Central. 9:30 Eastern, 8:30 Central, with the live show on Wednesday. And they'll have don't know what their schedule is going to be with College Game Day taking their normal Saturday morning away from. I don't know if they're still going to do something Saturday morning, if they're going to go to Friday night because of that. But hey, they'll definitely let you know, and they're always dropping new and fresh content out there on the pregame show. And Dr. Cavil, we got some new and exciting shows getting ready to come on board with the BCSN family. Make sure you stay tuned to that. So we just appreciate each and every one of you all for being with us here on the Sports Wrap. So once again, for Kelvin Carter, Dr. Kenyatta Cavil, and my regular partner Brian Fulford, this is AD Drew. Hey, happy homecoming. They be catch you at 1601 South Martin Luther King in Tallahassee. I'll see you there on Saturday. We'll holler, y'all.
Holla.
But my beats, they are hard.